Most people believe they are in control of their lives, their choices, their desires, their beliefs. But neuroscience and psychology now confirm what Jung warned: much of what drives us is hidden beneath awareness. Studies show that up to 95% of our decisions are made unconsciously, guided by buried fears, suppressed memories, and automatic patterns formed long before we knew how to question them. We think we are rational. In reality, we are often puppets of forces we don't see. This is where Jung's Man and His Symbols becomes revolutionary. Man and His Symbols was Jung's final work, his last attempt to communicate his discoveries to the general public, stripped of technical jargon. He wrote it at the end of his life, knowing time was short, determined to leave behind a clear map of the psyche for anyone brave enough to look inward. Rather than dry theory, it speaks in the primal language of dreams, myths, symbols, and images. Because the unconscious does not argue or explain, it shows. It whispers through symbols in your sleep, through recurring patterns in your life, through the stories humanity has told for thousands of years. The book explains why your dreams are not random but coded messages from the unconscious. How your hidden fears and desires shape your behavior more than logic ever will. What symbols truly are, the psyche's language, connecting personal wounds to universal archetypes. Why true transformation requires facing the very parts of yourself you've denied, shamed, or buried. The psyche speaks in symbols, and if we do not learn to listen, we remain strangers to ourselves. For Jung, consciousness, our thoughts, plans, feelings, is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath lies the unconscious, a vast sea of impulses, traumas, desires, and archetypes. Universal patterns such as the shadow, the hero, the mother, the trickster, that shape not only our personal lives but entire cultures. Dark psychology confirms this. People don't just lie to others. We lie to ourselves constantly, repressing truths too uncomfortable to bear. But what we repress doesn't disappear, it festers. The more we deny our anger, shame, or fear, the more it erupts in destructive ways: passive aggression, projection, addictions, or violence. Jung called the process of healing this divide individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating shadow and light into a unified, authentic self. It is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. The book is divided into 5 main essays. Let's explore each. 1. Approaching the unconscious. The most dangerous thing about the unconscious is that you don't believe it controls you. People imagine they are rational beings, that their choices, desires, and beliefs come from logic. Jung disagreed. He argued that the unconscious is not a silent background, it is the hidden engine of human behavior. And the proof is everywhere, in your dreams, in your slips of the tongue, in the fantasies you never admit to, in the addictions that run your life. The unconscious does not speak in plain words. It speaks in images, in symbols, in impulses you cannot trace to any source. A nightmare of drowning. A sudden rage at a stranger. A dream of being chased. You dismiss these as random, but Jung argued they are messages from the psyche, encrypted in a language you refuse to learn. Ignore them, and the unconscious does not go away. It takes over. Here's the shocking truth. Most people are already possessed. Neuroscience confirms this. Studies show that 95% of human decisions are unconscious, made before your rational brain even has the illusion of control. Experiments using fMRI scans reveal that your brain decides seconds before you're even aware of your choice. Free will? A comforting myth. The unconscious pulls the strings and the ego takes the credit. This is where dark psychology enters. What you repress does not vanish, it mutates. Refuse to face your aggression, and it returns as domestic violence, road rage, or trolling online. Suppress desire, and it leaks out as addiction, obsession, or compulsive pornography. Pretend you are a good person, and your unacknowledged shadow projects onto others. They become evil, corrupt, dangerous. Whole genocides have been born from this blindness. History proves Jung's warning. In 1930s Germany, the collective unconscious erupted in mass hysteria. Millions who thought they were logical, civilized people fell under the sway of a man who embodied their unspoken fears and desires. They didn't follow Hitler because of rational arguments. They followed because he activated archetypes buried deep in the collective psyche: the father, the shadow, the destroyer. People obeyed not politically, but mythically. Science shows the same mechanisms in everyday life. Advertisers use color, sound, and repetition not to inform you, but to bypass your rational mind. A red logo spikes your heartbeat. A jingle implants itself in your memory like a ritual chant. Studies on subliminal priming prove you can be nudged to buy, vote, even think differently without conscious awareness. The unconscious is a battlefield, and most people don't even know the war is happening. Jung saw dreams as the psyche's attempts at balance, a dialogue with the unconscious. But modern man shrugs them off. He thinks he's too rational to care about dreams, even as he spends hours watching movies, listening to music, scrolling through TikTok, all of which are dreams created by others. When you ignore your own symbolic life, you become hypnotized by someone else's. The cost of ignoring the unconscious is staggering. Depression often masks a conflict between ego and shadow. Anxiety can be the body's alarm bell for a truth the conscious mind refuses to face. Addiction is a ritual of escape from symbols too painful to confront. Every symptom, Jung warned, is a message. But modern man doesn't translate the message. He numbs it with pills, distraction, endless scrolling. Here's the darkest truth. What you refuse to see in yourself will return as fate. Ignore your anger, and it destroys your marriage. Repress your fear, and it paralyzes your ambition. Deny your shadow, and you will meet it in the form of an enemy who embodies everything you hate. What you don't integrate controls you. Jung's point is brutally clear. The unconscious will be lived out, one way or another. You can face it directly through dreams, symbols, and self-confrontation. Or you can ignore it and watch it erupt as neurosis, addiction, failed relationships, political hysteria, or war. Modern man thinks he has outgrown myth and magic. But the unconscious is not gone. It has only gone underground, where it works in silence. And the one who denies it most is the one most controlled by it. The unconscious is not a theory. It is the hidden hand that writes your life story. And until you approach it with honesty, courage, and brutal self-reflection, you are not living. You are being lived. 2. Ancient myths and modern man. If the unconscious speaks in symbols, then myths are humanity's oldest language. Long before science, long before psychology, human beings looked at the chaos of existence, death, love, betrayal, storms, war, hunger, and clothed it in story. Gods fought, tricksters deceived, heroes descended into the underworld. To modern eyes, these myths are quaint superstitions, folklore for primitive people. But Jung argued something far more unsettling. Myths are not dead. They are alive in us right now. Every culture that has ever existed tells in its own way the same stories. The flood. The devouring mother. The hero who must slay the dragon. The trickster who overturns order. Why do these images recur everywhere, from ancient Sumeria to Norse sagas to modern cinema? Because they emerge from what Jung called the collective unconscious, the deep reservoir of archetypes that every human shares. Myths are not fiction. They are the psychic blueprints of humanity. And here's the dark psychology twist. When we lose connection to myth, the archetypes don't disappear. They act themselves out unconsciously. Deny the trickster, and he slips into politics as corruption and deceit. Refuse the shadow, and it emerges as scapegoating, racism, or mass hysteria. Pretend the hero's journey doesn't exist, and you find yourself stuck in endless mediocrity, never answering the call to confront your own darkness. Modern life, Jung warned, suffers not from a lack of facts, but from a lack of meaning. We have data, but no story. We've killed the gods, but not the forces they represented. And so those forces return, twisted, disguised. Think of the 20th century. Entire nations, stripped of myth and symbol, fell under the sway of demagogues who became living archetypes, father figures, tricksters, false messiahs. Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin did not merely govern, they embodied shadow images that people unconsciously projected onto them. Millions followed, not rationally but mythically. Science reinforces this in disturbing ways. Studies of propaganda show that symbols bypass the rational brain and strike directly at the amygdala, the seat of fear and desire. Logos, flags, anthems, these are not decoration, they are modern spells. Neuroscience has shown that repeated symbolic imagery can literally rewire neural pathways, creating loyalty and identity stronger than logic could ever achieve. What the ancients knew through myth, modern marketing and politics exploit through branding. But it is not only in politics that myths remain alive. Every superhero film is a retelling of the hero's journey. Every love song repeats the myth of union and separation. Horror films are modern rituals of shadow confrontation. The monster we cannot escape is always our own repressed fear. Our entertainment is full of myths because our psyches are starving for them. Jung's warning is clear: you cannot escape myth. If you don't approach it consciously, it will seize you unconsciously. The man who claims to believe in nothing, who laughs at religion and scoffs at myth, still kneels before archetypes. He may not call them gods, but he worships money, power, fame, ideology. And in his denial, he becomes possessed. That is what Jung means when he says modern man is adrift. Without myths to guide him, he is a ship without a compass, prey to whatever unconscious storm rises first. Myths are not children's tales. They are survival maps. Ignore them, and you walk blind into the same traps your ancestors named thousands of years ago. 3. The process of individuation. If myths are the collective stories of humanity, individuation is the personal myth each of us must live. Jung saw it as the central task of human existence, to become whole by integrating the parts of ourselves we've denied, repressed, or buried in shadow. But unlike the glossy slogans of modern self-help, individuation is not about becoming happy or positive, it is about becoming real. Most people spend their lives trapped in the persona, the social mask they wear to be accepted. The dutiful employee, the charming friend, the obedient child. The problem is that the persona is only a fragment of the psyche. The more you identify with it, the more you cut off everything that doesn't fit: anger, fear, sexual desires, ambition, shame. And where do those unwanted parts go? Into the shadow. Here lies the terrifying truth. What you exile into the shadow doesn't die. It festers. It manipulates you from the dark. Neuroscience shows that suppressed emotions don't vanish. They remain active in the limbic system, altering perception and behavior. Trauma researchers like Van der Kolk demonstrate that the body literally holds on to unprocessed pain, replaying it in symptoms, panic attacks, addictions, even autoimmune disorders. What you refuse to face internally, you will reenact externally. This is why people repeat toxic relationships, chase the same failures, sabotage their own success. It's not bad luck. It's the unconscious trying to resolve unfinished business. Jung called this the return of the repressed. Dark psychology studies echo it. When shame is buried, it emerges as cruelty. When vulnerability is denied, it becomes manipulation. When fear is ignored, it transforms into aggression. Individuation begins the moment you stop blaming fate and recognize the enemy you keep fighting is often yourself. But here's the paradox. The shadow is not only darkness. Within it also lies everything you've disowned that is vital. Creativity, strength, intuition, the power to set boundaries. Jung insisted that to meet the shadow is terrifying, but also redemptive. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. Modern science gives this mystical claim teeth. Studies of exposure therapy show that healing comes not from avoidance, but from confrontation. Only by facing the feared memory, image, or emotion does the nervous system learn it is survivable. Avoidance keeps the fear alive. Exposure rewires the brain. Jung anticipated this decades before neuroscience. Wholeness begins when you walk into what you fear most. The process of individuation, then, is nothing less than a descent into the underworld of your own psyche. Myths have always described it. Orpheus descending for Eurydice, Christ harrowing hell, the hero venturing into the dragon's cave. In psychological terms, the dragon is your shadow, the part of yourself that can destroy you if you deny it, or transform you if you face it. And here's the most shocking truth. Individuation often feels like madness before it feels like healing. Jung described patients who, upon confronting their shadow, felt as if they were dissolving, as if the ground of reality itself was cracking. In modern clinical terms, this is the nervous system reorganizing itself. Old neural pathways, forged in fear and suppression, begin to collapse. New ones are carved. It feels like death because, in a sense, it is the death of the false self. But those who endure emerge different. Not perfect. Not pure. Whole. They no longer live only for approval, nor are they enslaved by compulsions they don't understand. They gain what Jung called psychological sovereignty. They can walk away from manipulation. They can endure solitude. They can love without clinging. They are no longer divided against themselves. The cost is immense, facing your own darkness, the trauma of your childhood, the rage you've denied, the envy you've hidden, the wounds you've disguised. But the alternative is worse. A life lived as a puppet of the unconscious, mistaking your shadow for fate. Individuation is not optional. It is the only path to becoming who you truly are. The only question is whether you will choose it willingly, or whether life will drag you into it through breakdowns, crises, and betrayals. Jung's warning is chilling. If you refuse the journey, you will remain half a person, doomed to repeat the same cycle until your last breath. 4. Symbolism in the visual arts. For Jung, art is never just art. It is the unconscious speaking in color, in shape, in sound. To look at a painting is to enter a dialogue with the psyche, not only the artist's, but your own. That's why certain images strike us with a force beyond reason. You don't need to be religious to feel awe in front of a cathedral window, or educated in aesthetics to be haunted by a surrealist dreamscape. The unconscious recognizes itself in symbols long before the conscious mind understands. Consider the ancient cave paintings of Lascaux or Altamira. Why did our ancestors, with nothing but firelight and crude pigments, cover walls with animals, spirals, and hunting scenes? These were not decorations. They were invocations. Rituals in pigment to bridge the inner and outer worlds. The same impulse carried into religious iconography: crosses, halos, serpents, trees of life. They are not inventions of any single culture. They are psychic patterns, archetypes that rise from the collective unconscious. That is why certain symbols repeat across millennia. The mandala, a circle that represents wholeness, appears in Hindu yantras, Christian rose windows, and Tibetan thankas. The serpent, embodiment of danger and renewal, slithers through Genesis, Aztec myth, and Indian Tantra. The tree stands as axis mundi in Norse Yggdrasil, the Buddha's Bodhi tree, and the cross of Christ. These are not coincidences. They are recurring psychic blueprints, what Jung called primordial images. Artists, Jung argued, are often the first to feel the stirrings of the collective unconscious. They sense what the culture represses, what it refuses to name. And so they become its alchemists. The Surrealists painted the dream world when rationalist Europe denied it. Picasso shattered form to express a world collapsing into war. Frida Kahlo painted pain and blood when femininity was supposed to be delicate. But Jung's point extends beyond galleries. Art is not confined to canvases and statues. Modern advertising, with its carefully engineered logos and images, exploits the same unconscious language. Corporations spend billions not to appeal to your reason, but to hijack your archetypes. The Nike swoosh is not a checkmark. It's the wing of Hermes, the god of speed. Apple's bitten fruit recalls the fall in Genesis, the taste of forbidden knowledge. Luxury brands wrap themselves in golden circles and monograms that echo ancient royal seals. You don't buy these things, you submit to the symbols they carry. Neuroscience explains why this works. Brain scans show that symbolic imagery activates the limbic system, the emotional brain, bypassing logic entirely. That's why a flag can make someone cry, or why certain propaganda can mobilize millions. Symbols are not decorative. They are levers of the psyche. And this brings us to the darker side of Jung's insight. Symbols can liberate, but they can also enslave. A mandala drawn in meditation can guide someone toward inner integration. But a swastika, stripped from its ancient meaning and weaponized by ideology, can possess entire nations. Jung saw the rise of fascism as a collective possession, archetypes flooding a society that had lost its conscious connection to them. When symbols are repressed, they return distorted, and the result is catastrophe. Art, then, is dangerous precisely because it is powerful. It bypasses reason. It awakens what lies buried. That's why totalitarian regimes fear artists as much as they fear revolutionaries. Because art doesn't just depict the unconscious, it summons it. To engage with art consciously is to approach the unconscious willingly. To ignore it is to let others weaponize it against you. Jung's lesson is stark. Every symbol you see is not neutral. It is either revealing your soul or shaping it without your awareness. 5. Symbolic life, the search for meaning. Jung's final message is simple but devastating. Modern man suffers not from a lack of information, but from a lack of meaning. We know how to cure diseases, build skyscrapers, and destroy entire cities with bombs, but we do not know why we live, why we suffer, or what our existence is for. The result is not progress, it is despair. He called this the problem of the symbolic life. Without symbols, the bridges between the conscious mind and the unconscious depths, life shrinks to mere survival. We wake, we work, we consume, we sleep, but we do not live. And this vacuum, Jung warned, is what drives people to collapse into addictions, compulsions, and collective madness. Look around today and you see what he foresaw. Rates of anxiety and depression are higher than ever recorded. Suicide has become a leading cause of death among the young. Entire societies drown in narcotics, digital distractions, pornography, gambling, consumerism, all desperate attempts to fill a psychic void. Neuroscience confirms this. Chronic meaninglessness is processed by the brain as a stressor, activating the same circuits as physical pain. Loneliness, researchers found, registers in the brain just like being burned. We are not only lost, we are wounded by our lack of meaning. And here dark psychology enters again. When people cannot create meaning consciously, they become vulnerable to meaning manufactured for them. Extremist ideologies, cults, conspiracy theories, all are modern myths for people who have forgotten how to listen to their unconscious. Jung saw Nazism not merely as politics, but as possession. A society cut off from its symbolic life became devoured by its collective shadow. The same mechanism repeats whenever mass movements dehumanize outsiders, whenever leaders become false messiahs. Without symbols, people don't stop believing. They believe in anything. But Jung was not offering despair. He was offering a path. He believed that every individual must cultivate a symbolic life, a conscious dialogue with the unconscious through dreams, myths, rituals, art, and reflection. It does not mean returning to superstition. It means realizing that symbols are the natural language of the psyche. To ignore them is to starve the soul. To embrace them is to begin the process of individuation, of becoming whole. For Jung, true healing was not about eliminating pain, but about transforming it into meaning. Suffering becomes bearable, even transformative, when it is placed within a symbolic framework, when it is understood as part of a larger story of descent, confrontation, and rebirth. Neuroscience quietly agrees. Studies of post-traumatic growth show that people who assign meaning to their suffering recover faster and emerge stronger than those who see it as senseless. What myth and symbol provided for thousands of years, science is only now rediscovering. That meaning is not decoration, it is survival. Jung's closing warning in Man and His Symbols feels like prophecy for our century. If humanity does not recover its symbolic life, it will drown in nihilism, and its shadow will consume it. But for those willing to face their dreams, their myths, their shadows, there is another possibility. A life that is not only endured, but lived fully, consciously, symbolically.